Good evening, Danvers. My name is Mark Zubarek, and I have John Toomey here with us. Matt Duggan was unable to attend today, so we'll excuse him. But welcome to the Topics of the Town news of July 25th. Today is already July. Half the summer is gone. And we will endeavor to present our news briefs as we come to the subjects that are important to Danvers. Topics of the Town news. Reporting is direct and comprehensive. Our stories are in depth and represent stories that no other news media picks up. And we have an example of that today. We will always report only the truth, sometimes with our opinion included. So our opinion counts. We do a lot of hard work to get these stories. And what we have today, first story is number 3, Jalbert Lane. Jalbert Lane came on the horizon about 2 months ago. And it really hit the fan on June 18th when the Board of Selectmen, in their great wisdom, had a presentation made by the Danvers Housing Assistance Trust, I believe that's what they're called, by former chairman Mr. Trask, Gardner Trask. His function became chairman of the Danvers Housing Assistance Trust, as well as being a member of the selectmen. And we presented this story last show on July 11th as a special report by John Zavaglia. Since then, I have taken it upon myself to review that meeting from beginning to end, because I thought it was very important, because what it seems to be indicating is that we have a slam dunk going on here. The Danvers Housing Assistance Trust ramrodded the sale of the land, which is, and I visited that yesterday. I visited with the neighbors, and we will in next week or so produce a 20-minute, half-hour special about the impressions of the neighbors of how this process went about and what is it going to do to the neighborhood. But in the meantime, the Board of Selectmen decided to vote 3-2 to sell the land, which is a 150 by 100-foot plot of land, which is very, very small, residential one. It looks like there are wetlands in the back and all kinds of, brush and trees fallen in the area. However, the neighbors are very concerned about the impact this will have on their very nice neighborhood. It overlooks the river on the Riverview side, but very quiet, very cooperative neighborhood. And the vote of selectmen was, I think, unethical in a way, and I know that Mr. Trask and the Board of Selectmen are going to defend the vote, but it was a slap in the face to the neighbors, because the neighbors wanted to know about this project. They had a meeting a month before, and then all of a sudden it appears on the selectmen's agenda, and they're selling the land. The problem I have is that the Board of Selectmen at that time, at least one member, was very interested in selling the land, which is appropriate. That land has been reserved as open space, or at least it's on the open space directory, there are 126 different plots of land that are available. But no, this is the one that the Danvers Housing Assistance Trust wanted. They want to have, or they had, the selectmen sell the land to the Danvers Housing Assistance Trust because they had some funds available that were going to expire from the state and federal government for $128,000, I believe. Wasn't it $128,000, John?
Yes.
$128,000. The land, according to the assessor's office, is valued or assessed at $250,000.
A slight difference.
So why don't we just give things away? The selectmen were very adamant about being able to get some money back because that land has not been tax generating any tax revenue.
Well, what about all the other open space? If you're going to push this money-grabbing, tax-getting land, I mean, to me, it's rather obvious that, oh, the heck, as far as the selectmen are concerned, all they're saying is, oh, the heck with what the neighbors think. We're going to do it anyway.
And they did.
They did.
They did. They basically said that to the neighbors.
When you consider how much open space land the town already has, floating all over the place, and to do this in that particular spot where the neighbors really are against it, and really not give them more or less an open meeting where they can really discuss it and get their opinion out. Where are you, Mr. Selectman?
And Mrs. Selectman.
All right, and Mrs. Selectman.
And the thing is that, as you can notice on our previous show on July 11th, I had a clip that was captured from that meeting of June 18th. And even then, when Mr. Trask was going to explain the proposal, there was a comment made at the Board of Selectmen, is he going to recuse himself? There's a conflict of interest. And then all of a sudden, 3 of the 5, which included Mr. Trask, voted to sell the land or devote the land to the town Housing Assistance Trust. So it's just an explanation. There is some conflict of interest or impropriety of interest in this situation.
It certainly raises a question.
So that question has been raised. There are efforts being made to determine from the Ethics Commission of whether this is appropriate or not. Mr. Trask has embodied himself into an explanation to the legal counsel for the town, and the legal counsel for the town is going to say, you're absolutely right, because that's what they're paid for. Every time I've made a proposal at town meeting, I was always illegal, so I don't know whether I'm always illegal or is Mr. Trask always legal. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to wait and see. But what we intend to do is have a brief documentary or kitchen roundtable discussion with the neighbors, and we'll present that to the general public during the next week or so. So that is where we are. This is where we're going, and stay tuned. So the next item I have here is the Selectmen's meeting of July 9th. And basically that was pretty uneventful. There was not much being discussed. This is the monthly meeting for the summer. And speaking of that, we, as Topics of the Town News, are not going to have any presentations during August except for the special about Jalbert Lane. So we will not be seeing you until September 5th, which will be a Thursday presentation, and hopefully we'll meet up again. So There is, Mr. Duggan has not been able to attend this presentation, but we always rely on Matt to give us a report on the selectmen's meeting. He always attends, and he's been faithful about that. So we'll see how things work. We'll have Matt back reporting on the selectmen's meeting. The next story we have, and this is my old story, John. I hate to say it, but our water and sewer rates, like I reported last show on July 11th, have gone up by 15%. And I went through the documentation that I have received during the monthly meetings that they have, and I've been able to determine that the result of this rate increase is a cumulative overspending on other capital projects.
Well, that's what the selectmen have been doing for years, and they've been getting away with it. The average citizen out there doesn't know what's going on, doesn't vote, so he's getting billed for it and he's paying for it.
So I tried to explain that last show, and the problem is that it's a hidden increase that's been accumulating
Yes.
over the last 3 or 4 years. And I sat through all the rate increases in the previous years, and they've always been 1.2, 1.4%. And the sewer was pretty stable because there's only so much water you can send back, and that's what we get charged for. I've determined one thing is that during the time when the overspending or the accounting error occurred was to make sure that there was enough money in reserves to purchase the water and sewer garage on, what's the, Canal Street.
Canal Street.
That was a $2.2 million, then they added another $300,000, and now they're adding another $875,000. It's a $3 million spending package.
That's no surprise.
Well, the thing is, why do they hide it in the background and then surprise everybody with a 15% increase in the water rates? So that I've determined that that's one of the reasons why this rate increase occurred. The second reason is, and they've been, the Water and Sewer Board and the management of the water and sewer, and in this case, the town manager showed up at the rate increase hearing with his, and I hate to say, consigliere, the finance director. So I'm using the terms because I like them, and that's how I feel. The reasons that we're giving at the meeting to increase the rates were that we're not selling enough water. Well, we have been very successful in implementing the water, reducing the water consumption, because we have all kinds of measures that have been implemented to reduce the shower head volume of water comes through. The toilets are down to 1.2.
If you're going to reduce the amount of water you use, does it make any sense to increase the cost of the water? I mean, where is this coming from?
Well, there's two reasons for that, John. One of the reasons is that they did not anticipate that big of a reduction, and the water supply has always been there. I mean, we have level 4 water restrictions starting in April now, and they're up to, I think, 2 or 3 right now. But we've had so much rain that the supply is there. That's not the problem. The problem is that we're processing, let's say, 3 million gallons now. In the past, we were processing 4 million gallons per day. The problem is that nobody has taken responsibility for reduction of the processing of the water, the reduction of the additive chemicals that they have to add. We have spent $20 million on a new filtration plant that was done, I don't know, 8 years ago. $20 million. And all it does is duplicates what's being done in the existing plant, which has 2 trains running through it because you need that backup system. But now we have a water treatment plant, or in addition to it, that's sitting there. So we have not reduced our operating costs. We have not reduced our capital facilities costs, which means chemicals, operations of the hours of operations. All they do is basically filter and treat the water and send it up to the tank at Folly Hill and at Danvers State Hospital area. And then during the day, all that goes through and pressurizes the water lines that we have in our town.
They get more money to spend, which is what they're doing.
That's exactly what it is. And the thing is, I have asked that question and nobody's got an answer. So we need to continue. I'm going to be going to the Water and Sewer Board meeting and the electric company meeting, and I think they're going to be on July 30th. But we need to get that going. The original water and sewer article that we have approved at town meeting, $475,000. All that is contingency, and to cover the costs of the larger office building that they have planned. And I'll tell you, I sat through the meetings and I asked the questions when this office was first being planned. And what has happened is I was told at that time, because the office and the garage was going to cost $5.5 million. That's what they wanted to spend. They reduced that back to the 2.2 plus the 300. But the comment to me was, don't worry about it. We'll get it from town meeting. So now we have a 15% water rate increase. Good luck with that. I'm going to be keep watching, and we have the Water and Sewer Company is under the auspices of the Department of Public Utilities, and may have to be petitioned by the Danvers customers to investigate this rate increase and reverse this rate increase if possible.
Good luck.
Well, listen, we have another story that's coming right behind this, and I'll tell you a little bit more. The Department of Public Utilities does take the personal interest because they're governed by the laws of Massachusetts and the chapters that apply to water treatment or water departments. They're similar to what the Municipal Light Board has to function under, Chapter 164. And that's the next story. The next story is basically Danvers Electric Company right now is being investigated. And I'll just read you a little blurb. The letter that was submitted to the Department of Public Utilities included a list of such transfers. This is in regard to the $5 million transfer to the retirement board, the $3 million for Locust Street intersection construction, the other $3 million for the Summer Street intersection construction, which really leads me to conflict of interest again between the DPW and the Municipal Light Board and the Water and Sewer Board.
Well,
It's being run by the same individual, and he has his interest in the DPW.
well, what's boiling down is the electric light department, the company, or whatever you want to call it, is paying for items that appear to be the Department of Water. So is this correct? And that's the question. Should the electric light, in effect, the rates on the electric light being used to pay for other items other than the electric department?
And let me just this petition includes a list of such transfers which it alleged were for purposes unrelated to Danvers Electric provision of electricity to its customers. The letter also included a petition signed by 39 Danvers Electric customers requesting that the department conduct a review and investigation pursuant to General Law, Chapter 164, of rates set by Danvers Electric for the past 4 years, and that the transfers of funds balance identified in the letter be returned to Danvers Electric customers through rate reduction and/or direct refunds. This is a propriety of transfers of these funds to the DPW, to the town of Danvers, to operate their Department of Public Works projects. And the thing is, finally, this took 3 years to get to this point, and the DPU does not work very fast, that's for sure. But I have provided you a copy of this,
Yes.
and we'll be following that up. There are comments that are due from the Danvers Electric Company, and this is basically a investigation and a suit of the Danvers Electric Company. So what we need to do is we need to follow this up and request residents to be present and available to attend this kind of a investigation. So that's coming. Hopefully by this, there's an indication from the existing rate change that you have seen on your bill for the electric company, is that they have reduced the fuel adjustment costs by $3 a month as an average. $3 a month, I mean, it's a big savings, but there's $22 million of cash sitting there they don't know what to do with. They
Well.
need to way to spend it. Okay, you want to talk about the,
Well, I just want to do a quickie. Walking around Danvers, it's amazing the things you can run into and run across. I had a friend of mine ask me about I don't know how many people, I've run across very, very few people who are familiar with the cemetery that's on High Street. It's just a few hundred yards down from the Danvers Center on the right-hand side. You walk down, it's a very nice, it's a small area. You want to run one.
clip one? Yeah. Oh, there you go.
As you can see, it's very open, a lot of space.
This is on High Street.
This is on High Street. It's
Right.
just very few yards
By the old
down,
Friendlies.
very few yards down from the center. Most of the tombstones are unreadable, they're so old. But I got asked about it, and I had to admit I hadn't the faintest idea, so I went down. Looking at the plaque at the entrance, first thing it mentions is the French and Indian War. Here you can see the Revolutionary War. The French and Indian War was about 30, 40 years prior to that. But rather interesting, back then, here in this area around here, the British had the coast from like Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts. The French basically had a section of Canada. And interesting, in between the British and the French was the Indians, half a dozen different tribes, and substantial numbers. They went all the way from the coast all the way up St. Lawrence River over, basically over to the Mississippi. We only went in, you know, the end of Virginia, the end of Pennsylvania, and so forth. But rather interesting, the British were interested, another Revolutionary War. The British were interested in securing the continent, and they were. That's why all of the colonial people came over. They were farming. Basically, they were farming and so forth, but there was some manufacturing and so forth. And the French were doing the same things up in Canada. And as I say, the Indians were in between, and they more or less formed a barrier between the British and the French.
So the French stayed up in Canada and in the territories up north?
Yes, but what was going on was both the Canadians, or rather the French and the British, they wanted to basically secure all of that land over there. They could form basically another continent of their tribe, more or less, all British or all French, which would create fantastic expansion. Back then, of course, everything was basically farming, but they could, as it got bigger, more and more manufacturing would be in there.
So Danvers was involved in the development of the colonies as they went further west.
It's rather interesting. The early years, the people who came over, and they were various, the English, the Irish, the Scotch.
The Scots, not the Scotch.
They were followers of the king. Basically, that's how
They were loyal to the royalty, yeah.
They were for the monarchy, and the French were the same way. And that's basically how the world was over in Europe. It was all kings who ran countries, and that's how things went. It was rather interesting. As the years went by, and basically the French started to come down to the borders and the St. Lawrence River and so forth, and they were building forts and communities and so forth. And the British became upset, and they sent troops out to drive the French back. And for the first few years, that didn't work. The French tied up with the Indians, and every time the British tried to secure an area, the Indians and the French would come in and drive them out. It's rather interesting.
So it was a land grab at that time?
Basically, yes. It was, one thing I was surprised to learn, Danvers. Danvers was named by the English governor of Massachusetts as more or less, as a favor to one of his friends. So we're named after somebody.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Well, but I can't find where the devil it is, who it came from or what and so forth.
It came from the Indians. They had a lousy immigration policy at that time, John. The Indians did.
Well, the Indians had multiple.
I'm trying to kid with you,
well,
John. The immigration policy at that time was non-existent.
Well, in many ways, it may be not written, but it was there was a policy. But the Danvers at that time was roughly about 2,000 people, but it covered a vast area. And it rather interesting. About 100 of the Danvers sites signed up for the French and Indian War. In other words, they signed up for the British to go and fight the French. It rather interesting if you go to the cemetery to see some of the names in there.
Well, you also had another clip that you wanted to show on regard to the library.
Well, let me finish this one.
Okay.
Run the clip 1 again, will you?
Clip 1.
Clip 1.
In the meantime,
Can you do that?
yeah.
But it's rather interesting. One of the things that really fascinated me about this was the fact that as the war.
I think we're going to skip that one, John.
Okay, well, we'll have to skip it. Just a quickie closeout then. As the war more or less 1754 to 1766, but it boiled down to the British actually won, and they more or less forced the, thank you, they more or less forced the French out, and they also basically forced the Indians back towards the middle of the country. But it's rather interesting that the process of this for the colonials, the British colonials, was that because the English sent these troops over, they forced the colonials to pay for it. They had to supply supplies, they had to supply housing and so forth. And over a period of years, this became basically a lot of the reasons why we had the Revolutionary War. The people became not king followers, but they wanted to become independent. They were tired of being taxed and charged for various things. So this is something I think that's interesting. Here's one of the reasons this cemetery has a lot of the people who created more or less the reasons for the Revolutionary War, the desire for the Revolutionary War.
Well, our seal for the town of Danvers is the King Unwilling.
Yes. And
so I think we still have that seal on our
yes.
Paperwork, but it's so appropriate even at this time because we don't want any kings around here. We want to be independent.
One of the things really that surprises me is how economically well the colonials were doing. That was one of the reasons why they wanted to become free, was because as they had a better life, the British was charging them more in taxes and so forth.
Taxation without representation.
Yes.
And we don't have representation even now.
And as you go through this cemetery, it's amazing to see all the
Ebenezer Jacobs. Look at that. That is
yes.
That is an old-fashioned name.
All
right, let's move on to the next clip, John, if you want.
My clip?
Yeah, the library.
Okay, well, here's a quickie. As I say, wandering around the town, sometimes you run across things you don't expect. You want to run clip 2?
He's getting
As I was walking down, I ran across the library, and what's there but a fire truck. Apparently there was the alarm went off or something went off. The library was not open, and as I say, walking down the street and seeing this happen,
that is not just a fire truck, John. That is our new tower.
Yes.
And that is a fantastic piece of equipment, except,
And here's the small emergency truck.
right,
And as you can see, not a soul there. This was early in the morning. And they were only there a few seconds. They went in, a couple of minutes later they came out. And but it's rather fascinating to walk down the street and all of a sudden see the fire engines and everything, and especially at the library.
they do training.
Yes.
I don't know about the library, but I've noticed them at the high school, where they're in the parking lot on the side of the high school, and
Yep.
they have the tower and everything else stretched out. So it is, our fire department has been very, very well trained, and they prevent a lot of accidents and a lot of fires by being present and advising
Yes.
people about
Yeah.
their facilities.
Well, it's nice to see how efficient all these things are going on. As you walk around town, you see all the various town departments working.
Well, I'll tell you, the town's responsibility is to provide fire and police protection. Those are the two key elements. The third one is streets and and when they have the streets, they have fire protection along, with the hydrants.
Well,
and
they
everything else.
provide all the necessities that the individuals can't provide: water, sewer, electricity.
Right.
And you say police, fire. We're communities, and this is basically, we're very lucky to be living in a community like this. I don't know if I should mention this, but
Go
the
for it.
paper
Why not?
had a article the other day about proud to be an American,
Yeah.
and I wrote a letter in response to it, and they published that. But to me, Danvers is a keen example of why I'm proud to be an American.
And you're proud, first of all, through Danvers, through the state, to be an American.
Yes.
Right. So speaking of that, this is a great segue, John, to my next story that we have on the agenda. Is we have a story that has been bantered around by us for the last two shows, and what it really is what exactly is a news desert? I'm looking at an article that was published, about 3 months ago. And what this thing is a proposal by the state legislature, and it's being proposed by Lori Ehrlich from Marblehead. And it's a study, well, it's the state being involved to determine why we have such a lack of community news, local presentation, similar to what we're trying to do here for Danvers. And as you have seen, our presentations are solely focused on Danvers activities, Danvers politics, Danvers cemeteries like you just showed, Danvers Fire Department. We want to concentrate on our local community. But this is a bill that's been filed in the state legislature for a study committee to determine why is there such a lack of community news. And community news to me means local news. Remember when we had Salem Evening News, they had a section for Danvers, section for Peabody, section for Salem, and Beverly is another one that was in there. Danvers Herald used to have focused stories about Danvers. Now, what we have is Salem News, they call it now, and it's focused on Salem. And state and national news that they want to present. We can get that from the Boston Globe or Boston Herald or whatever you want to call it. But the thing is that this is an attempt by the state legislators, and I haven't heard from Ted Speliotis in regard to this, but Lori Ehrlich contacted me, and I have filed a letter during their committee deliberations of reviewing this. I have not received any notification what the status is now, but it's a committee that she wants to set up of 17 different individuals from different sources in the community.
To do what?
To review and understand why there's such a lack in community news.
Well,
And what it comes down to, it's all financial. The newspapers now exist only for the advertising.
well, that's because of computers and phones and so forth.
Even computers and phones. Look at Danvers Herald. Danvers Herald has now
Danvers Herald doesn't exist anymore.
combined with a paper for Beverly.
Yes.
And their focus is on Beverly. It's not on Danvers. However, today I picked up a Wicked Local for Danvers, which was for the Crease and Cook remediation of the contaminations at that site. It's a story that was probably written 8-10 months ago, and it's a repeat of what was discussed, and we both attended that meeting with the state and the federal EPA officials. So there's nothing new in there. They just interjected that to fill space.
Well, I think the thing that really disturbs me is, quote, the total cost for the remedial action will cost $24.3 million. I mean, good God.
And you think that's the final number?
No.
Double
well,
it.
Well, double it. But that one point is just nothing. When we did that program, we did an overall review of leather factories throughout Danvers, and I think I came up with something like 14 or 17.
No,
or
we
so
came up
forth.
with 25 different
25.
locations.
Whatever it was. But it basically, what I'm getting at is this is just one of those locations. What we should be doing, and we're going to have to eventually, is go through all of those locations and check and see if they're hazardous waste full. And they more than likely are. Can you imagine what that's going to cost us?
Well, the thing is, John, is that what this represents is the Superfund investment by the federal government to remediate these contaminations. But there's a component that the town and the state are responsible for. So what my interest is going to be, when are we going to start paying for our portion of this? Because this does not come free. We still need to invest, just like we did for Brown Pond.
Well,
Brown Pond, we invested, I think, 2 or 3 town meetings, $150,000 each for testing.
but what about the impact of all of this on the residents in these areas? I mean, we saw what happened in Browns Pond. They went in and they removed considerable amount of soil. And are we going to do that all over town, or what's going to happen?
Well, John, another natural segue. This is to to remediate the land to be habitable, and this is the town's version of economic development, because that's a large postage stamp of land in the town of Danvers that has not been developed because there's contamination. Now, when they remove it, the town will be looking for locating some developments there. So, you know, you look at some of these things. I spoke to Mr. Aaron Henry, and the thing is that they have this Department of Economic Development inside Town Hall, but they have not even been able to identify all of the businesses that we have in town. We do not have a list of properties that are suitable for building residential, building commercial, that are available, and the town hall doesn't even know that these lands and pieces of property are available. They should have a process of disposing of some of these properties because they are being taken for taxes not being paid, and the town is losing on both sides. They're maintaining that piece of property, but they're also not collecting any taxes on it.
But they're already collecting more taxes and rates than they're spending.
Oh, I wouldn't agree with that because the town hall will say we don't get enough money. They're always looking for money.
They've got millions of dollars in the bank that they're doing nothing with.
There you go. And that's where the Board of Selectmen needs to step in and finally realize that you cannot beat the residents for more taxes
you can
over
as
and
long
over.
as the residents don't complain.
Well, sooner or later they have to start saying, you know, enough is enough. And the thing is, I hope it's soon because our residents are getting beat up on taxes every time you turn around. So, I spoke last July 11th that we need to explore our economic development department. Find out. I have a interview that I've conducted with Mr. Aaron Henry, and I will be looking at that for the September 5th show, I believe. We will be discussing that, and maybe we'll get some more information. Maybe he'll grant us an interview or come on the show.
That would be great.
Yeah, but I think I don't know. We'll see. Let me invite him, and maybe we can talk about economic development because we have done some past filming of downtown. And in September, the location on Maple Street, the third story that's going to be added, will be starting. So maybe we can talk about that. And what we need to talk about is the 40R zoning, which is the state incentive or bribe to develop more congested areas of town. Maybe we'll see some results because right now what they're talking about is the planning department is reviewing and looking at extending the 40R zoning all the way down to 128.
128.
And the thing that I don't understand is we're rushing to judgment because we want to get another $200,000 from the state as an incentive to do this.
Well, that's what the selectmen do. They
It's greed.
create sources of money.
The problem is that we have not seen results of the current zoning that we already passed, the 40R in the Maple Street, Hobart Street area.
Yeah, but that was passed just to encourage and to attract development. They don't really know what's out there. That's why they basically the rezoning is come in and put anything you want in here. And that's just to attract developers.
But what do you think the new zoning for Maple and High Street is going to be? It's going to be the same thing.
Yes.
So what do we don't know what the effects of the zoning are yet, but we're rushing to have it passed.
It's passed, basically.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of, because all I've been hearing from town meeting members and finance committee is that we're going to have a special town meeting in December to pass the zoning.
Yes. Well, that's how it works, unfortunately, at the moment. If you only have a quarter or a third of the total voters vote, then you have a very select group running the town. They're the town meeting members, they're the selectmen, and they're the various board members. And basically what they're doing now is they're trying to attract as much development as possible. The new zoning that they passed and that they're going to pass probably is, as I said, it's just an open door. Come in and just about build anything you want as long as you can pay taxes on it. Boom.
There you go. See, what my notes here say that what can the town do to assist the business community in expanding and increasing employment? Because that's the key. We do not have a transportation hub like Beverly has or Salem has. We are restricted on the access to and from Beverly, Boston, Salem.
Yeah, but basically what is it? Look at where they're proposing the overlay district, downtown Danvers, Danvers Square. What is there? What?
Small commercial, I mean small retail.
There aren't any retail, basically.
Yeah,
It's
you may be
just
right.
about all gone. That's one of the problems. When there was retail there, it was fairly busy and it paid a fair amount of taxes. Today, you've got what I call the service places. You got barber shops, you got nail clippers, you got toe clippers. You got restaurants. It's not anything that attracts large paying businesses that pay a lot of taxes. And you're not having that, you really don't attract a lot of people either. You don't have a lot of parking either. So that
We have no parking anymore because it's all either behind Brothers or on Hobart Street. That's
Yeah.
about the only two places. And those are filled up by 9 o'clock in the morning.
yeah. It's what can be attracted to downtown. And the only thing I heard when they were talking about the rezoning, they want to attract walking people who more or less don't have cars. I don't know if they're talking about, as you were talking about, busing and so forth.
Right. There isn't
Uh,
one.
But the first level, of the buildings will all be so-called businesses. What kind is interesting because they really didn't say what they expected. But the second and third levels would be residential apartments. It's, as I say, an open door. Come in and build just about anything you want.
Okay. The thing that we need to determine, and that's what I was trying to get to with Mr. Aaron Henry, is how much real employment do we have in the town of Danvers? It appears to me that 62, 114, and 128 are the thoroughfares that bring people through Danvers.
Correct.
They don't necessarily come and work in Danvers.
As I keep saying, we're a donut hole.
That's right.
People go through Danvers. Danvers really is a residential
It's a
town.
bedroom community, which is primarily residential. We do have 25 to 30% industrial commercial, but those are at Cherry Hill Park.
But they're also, the industry that we have is not, let's say, people oriented as far as creating a lot of jobs. They don't do that. I
Well,
mean,
we're not into fabrication. You're right.
when we had Sylvania, God help us when we had all the leather factories and so forth, we had a lot of businesses that attracted workers. We don't have that anymore.
500, 600 workers coming into Sylvania at one time.
Yeah.
That was the day. But the thing is that what I was just wondering, and we have a few minutes left, Sylvania now has been demolished.
Right.
It's down to bare dirt. But at the time when Sylvania has been sitting around for the last 10 years, maybe, or more, 10 or 15 years, wouldn't it have been a great idea for the town of Danvers to buy that property and locate the town offices, the Department of Public Works garage, the spoils area in the back where they have dirt? They would have had a wonderful facility, but they didn't pursue it. That was mentioned at one time 20 years ago. And the thing is that it was totally abandoned because they didn't think it was appropriate for the town to move there. Well, you're going to have medical facilities in there pretty soon.
Yes.
That's what they're going to build. Now, speaking of dirt, EPA and the dirt piles that we have seen from Brown Pond and other areas, I noticed that Endicott Park on the Forest Street side has a pile of dirt there. And I am just wondering whether that's the next stockpile of contaminated dirt. Now they're spreading it into Endicott Park.
Endicott.
We need to take a look at that. Well, I think we'll take a ride up there because I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be for DPW because they've moved their facility over to Canal Street. So it looks like a big pile of dirt to me.
Interesting.
You see, they didn't want it at the Holton Richmond. They didn't want it at Canal Street. They didn't want it at the dump. Oh, our what is it? A transfer station. Sorry. Well, Danvers, thank you for watching. We will be back September 5th as our new season begins, and we hope to have some comments and questions from you if you have any. Please give either me or John a call. We're in the book. Or give an email to DCAT and they will forward that information to us. Good night, Danvers, and have a safe and wonderful summer.
Take care. Enjoy.